Hey guys, tonight we step into a world gilded in gold but reeking of rot. You're standing in a vast marble corridor, the air thick with the scent of spiced oils, incense, and fear. Red silks ripple like blood on the breeze, and the flicker of torchlight dances off polished bronze busts that seem to smirk knowingly. Servants scurry past, their eyes fixed downward, terrified of being seen, terrified of being noticed. You hear the heavy thud of sandals behind you, followed by the shriek of someone being dragged away. The Emperor is awake. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And in the comments, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always fascinating to imagine who else is traveling back through time with us tonight. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in the Imperial Court now, a place where sanity once tried to bloom, but was quickly uprooted. You've heard the rumors of orgies, murders, poetry, and perfume-soaked crimes. You expected whispers in the shadows. Not this cacophony of chaos. Not this thundering ego that rules without consequence. The Emperor sits on a throne carved from ivory and obsidian, surrounded by peacocks and poets. Jesters and executioners. You can't tell which is which. He's young, too young to command such fear. His face is smooth, almost beautiful, and always lit by an expression just one twitch short of madness. His robe glimmers with threads of real gold. At his feet, a man with the voice of an angel sings a hymn to the Emperor's wisdom while balancing on one leg, blindfolded. No one dares to laugh. The last person who laughed was flayed and hung upside down in the garden. That was last week. You're allowed to watch but not to speak. The Emperor has banned unsolicited opinions. One look of boredom from him could mean death, but his whims are not entirely random. They are curated. Tonight, he demands a sea battle reenacted in the palace pool, complete with miniature ships and real drowning sailors. Tomorrow, perhaps a chariot race where the losers are burned alive with aromatic herbs for ambiance. And yet, despite the horror, there's something magnetic about him. His voice is hypnotic. His gaze pins you like an insect under glass. When he smiles, you understand why crowds once cheered for him, before they learned better. Historians still argue whether this emperor, whose name was once carved into the cornerstones of the empire, was a complete madman or a genius playwright who saw life as one long, decadent performance. Perhaps both. One chronicler described him as a man who lived only through spectacle, and that feels accurate. His rule is not governance. It is theater. Bloody, erotic, absurd theater. You pass a statue in the corridor, a likeness of him wearing a crown of sun rays. Around its base are offerings, fruit, flowers, small animals. The line between emperor and god has been thoroughly erased. And not by the people, by him. A herald slams his staff against the floor. His radiance will now bestow his attention. A line of trembling citizens is ushered forward. One offers a sonnet, another brings a box of jeweled lice said to be blessed by the moon. The emperor claps politely, then tosses the box into the fire. You make a note not to bring gifts. One poor man stutters while complimenting the emperor's new hairstyle. Bad move. The emperor rises slowly, the room silencing at the rustle of his robes. He walks over, places a single hand on the man's shoulder, and whispers something no one hears. A moment later, guards gently, almost lovingly lead the man away. You never see him again. It's not just cruelty, it's performance cruelty. The emperor doesn't just kill, he directs it. He doesn't just offend, he choreographs the offense. Every moment you spend in his court feels like walking a tightrope made of silk thread, stretched over boiling wine. There are no laws here, just moods, yet there are survivors. A few. Those who learn to mirror his emotions like a flawless mask. They applaud when he weeps. They cry when he laughs. You wonder if they even remember their original faces. You catch sight of a tapestry, massive and magnificent, hanging behind the throne. It depicts the emperor, larger than life, vanquishing a lion with his bare hands. Never happened. But history, here, is whatever he says it is. The real historians are in prison or in graves. A whisper reaches your ear too soft to track. Careful. He's watching. You realize you've been standing too still, too stiff. You force yourself to smile. Not too broadly, not too modestly. Just enough to look entertained, but not too entertained. Just enough to survive. You pass under a ceiling painted with stars. One servant tells you the emperor had it redesigned to match the night sky on the night of his birth. He once executed an astrologer for suggesting the stars that night were unremarkable. Now the stars shimmer on the plaster above you, all arranged to flatter a lie. Some say he truly believes in his divinity. Others say it's all a game to keep the Senate spinning in fear. Truth is, He probably doesn't know the difference anymore. Absolute power hasn't corrupted him, it's dissolved him. He's a perfume-scented fog wrapped in silk and blood. Barely human, mostly legend. And you keep your head down. You keep moving. You wonder what it would take to escape. You wonder what it would take to win his favor. You wonder, secretly, quietly just once what it would feel like to wield that kind of power. Because here's the real horror. You're starting to understand him. You hear the Emperor's laughter echo down the corridor long after you leave the hall. It's not the laugh of joy or amusement. It's the laugh of someone who knows the rules don't apply to him, and maybe never did. As you step through the perfumed archways of the palace, you can't help but wonder how someone becomes this way. Was he always a monster? Or did the crown do it? You're escorted to a chamber lined with painted panels depicting scenes from the Emperor's childhood. Except, of course, they've been reimagined, idealized into myth. In one, he slays a serpent with a toy sword. In another, he offers a starving beggar his royal bread. All lies. You've read enough of the real accounts to know that even as a child, he had peculiar tendencies. He wasn't born to rule, at least not directly. His uncle held the throne for years. A careful man with a talent for survival and a knack for seeing threats before they bloomed, which is probably why he kept the boy at arm's length, hidden away in a villa surrounded by tutors, entertainers, and guards who knew better than to say no. You walk through the boy's former wing of the palace, long since sealed off, and it still smells faintly of lavender oil and ink. The air is heavy, the kind of silence that remembers things. One of his earliest tutors, a Stoic philosopher who once lectured on duty and moderation, vanished mysteriously after suggesting that young nobles should learn to restrain desire. Another, a poet who dared to mock the boy's verse, was found in the garden, very poetic. If a little on the nose, you can still hear the murmurs from palace staff. The boy used to stage trials for lizards, punishing them with hot pins if they looked guilty. They say he once buried a slave alive just to see how long the screams would last. And yet, he could charm anyone. Everyone. Really, his eyes were wide and innocent when he wanted them to be. He had a way of looking up from a scroll or harp and making even the sternest general forget the horrors he'd just witnessed. You imagine him playing the lyre with blood still drying under his nails. Historians still argue whether his mother shaped the madness or merely amplified it. She was ambitious, famously so. Her name alone could silence a room. She'd clawed her way to influence through marriages, rumors, and strategic poisonings, depending on who you ask. She raised her son to believe he was divine, destined, even as a child. He was told the gods whispered in his dreams that Rome was waiting. When he finally did take the throne after a series of convenient deaths and suspicious accidents, the empire didn't weep. The people were distracted, amused by pageants and promises. The Senate was weary. And the boy emperor, he stepped into power like slipping into a warm bath. He didn't hesitate, didn't falter. He was already rehearsed. You walk past a fountain carved in his likeness at age 17. It's flawless, polished, and unnervingly lifelike. You half expect it to blink. A plaque below reads, "To the Savior of Rome, our eternal light." Someone has scratched a different word into the marble. Liar. That first year of rule was tamed by later standards. He still listened to advisors then, still made appearances in the forum. He even passed a few modest laws, mostly ceremonial, mostly boring. But he was watching, learning, figuring out which strings to pull and who squeaked when he did. You remember the infamous birthday celebration, the first truly public hint of what was to come, a 3-day festival of wine, fire eaters, and exotic animals imported from across the empire. Guests were served on plates made of sapphire. Some were never seen again. The emperor had declared it a celebration of life, but the morgue records say otherwise. And then there were the parties. Not parties like you know them, not gatherings, not even orgies. Not exactly. These were productions. You were invited not as a guest, but as a prop. If you pleased the emperor, you left with coin and favor. If you didn't, you left in a wheelbarrow, or didn't leave at all. One scholar suggested the emperor saw people the way a child sees toys. Some glittered, some squeaked, some broke in fun ways. It wasn't hatred, it was curiosity, sharpened by absolute power. A terrible mix, like giving a wolf a crown and teaching it to smile. There's a painting on the wall, original. They say of the emperor as a boy holding a dove, but his grip is too tight. The dove's wings are spread mid-flap, one eye wide in frozen panic. It's subtle. You'd miss it if you weren't looking closely, but it tells the whole story. You descend a spiral staircase into the archive vaults, places the public never sees. Here, the records are more honest. Wills signed under duress, complaints from servants, pleas from parents begging for their children's release. None of them ever reached the emperor's eyes. Of course, he had no time for paperwork. He was busy composing songs about his own greatness and having them performed at every festival. And yet, here's the twist: you begin to see how it worked. The people still loved him. At least, in the beginning. He gave them bread, games, songs. He was beautiful. Strange. Yes, but beautiful. He paraded through the streets in silver robes and left trails of coins behind him. Children chased after his chariot. Women fainted. Men cheered. And all the while, behind the curtain, the horrors continued. That's the trap, isn't it? Power wrapped in charm. Death hidden behind a harp string. You start to wonder if you'd lived then. If you'd seen him smile, would you have applauded? 2. Would you have looked away when the screams started? Just to keep your seat at the banquet. The corridors are growing darker now. The air colder. You realize you're heading deeper into the heart of the palace. Into the lair of a man who was never quite a man. A god in his own mind. A boy with the world in his palm and no one to tell him no. And the worst part, you're starting to see why he believed he deserved it. You press onward into the belly of the palace, where echoes hang like cobwebs. The walls here are thicker, colder. The laughter of the court has faded, and in its place is a soft, ambient silence, the kind only found in places designed to be forgotten. Here is where the lessons happened, the kind of lessons no child should ever have. You duck into a private chamber once used as a study. The shelves are still lined with scrolls, writings by the great Stoics, some still stained with wine. In the corner, a lyre missing 3 strings rests beside a broken wax tablet. The emperor was taught music, poetry, rhetoric, all the tools of a refined Roman ruler, but none of it stuck the way cruelty did. You sit where his old tutor once sat. Seneca. Yes, that's Seneca, a man of wisdom, restraint, and philosophical balance. A man who, by all accounts, genuinely tried. He believed, perhaps naively, that this boy could be molded, could be taught virtue. Spoiler, he could not. Seneca once wrote that true greatness lies in mastering the self. You imagine how those words must have sounded to a child already told he was divine, to a boy who had seen people punished for frowning in his presence. Historians still argue whether Seneca stayed on out of duty or fear, or maybe because he thought he could delay the inevitable. Spoiler again, he couldn't. The emperor's education was, at first, fairly normal, if you call normal being guarded day and night by men with gold-threaded tunics and swords. He studied the epics, learned declamation, and practiced swordsmanship. He played the lyre and wrote terrible poetry, which no one was allowed to critique. And slowly, everything became theater. There's a story from his 12th year that never made the official annals. One night, during a storm, a servant spilled wine on his robe. The boy said nothing. Hours later, the servant's body was found stuffed into a rain barrel, his hands removed. When asked, the boy denied involvement but casually remarked, "Clumsy men don't need fingers." You look at the fresco on the ceiling, once a portrait of Apollo, now painted over with the emperor's own face. That was always his favorite god. The god of music, the god of light, the god of plagues. You think about that combination and feel your stomach twist. By the time he was a teenager, he had already developed his signature blend of charm and sadism. He could compose a sweet melody one moment and order a throat slit the next, without a ripple in his expression. They say he once had a fellow page boy whipped until unconscious, then wrote a love poem about the color of his bruises. And no one stopped him, because who could? His mother, still alive then, had ambitions bigger than Rome. She saw his oddities as quirks. Power, she believed, was the cure for instability. A bigger stage, a brighter spotlight, a throne to sit on. What could possibly go wrong? You step into the training yard, overgrown now but still heavy with memory. This is where the emperor practiced swordplay, not with soldiers, but with prisoners dressed as gladiators. It was supposed to be educational. It was mostly just fatal. On more than one occasion, the training ended with real blood-spilled accidents. They were called, but he never seemed to miss. There's an old arena nearby, private, hidden from the public. You walk into its center, past crumbling columns and faded murals. This was where the young emperor would stage his own plays. He wrote them himself, of course, starred in them, too. The cast was made up of slaves, guards, anyone he decided looked the part. No one was allowed to leave until he'd received a standing ovation. And if the applause didn't sound sincere, the punishment was swift. He didn't just want to rule. He wanted to perform his rule. He wanted his life to be art, and for everyone else to be props. It's no coincidence that as his power grew, so did his sense of theatricality. He once entered a banquet dressed as Hercules, complete with lion-skin cape and wooden club, declaring he would conquer gluttony itself. That night, 12 pigs were roasted whole, and he vomited between courses to make room for more. Epic, in a grotesque sort of way. By his late teens, the transformation was complete. No longer just a spoiled boy or a dangerous adolescent, he was a ruler, an emperor. And somehow, that made everything worse. He summoned philosophers just to contradict them. He made generals wear dresses to breakfast, laughing as they tried to hold on to dignity with jelly-stained fingers. He once passed a law requiring senators to dance for him every Saturnalia. It was repealable only with a bribe. But there was still one person who tried to control him. One person who believed she could still pull the strings. His mother. You pass through the Hall of Mirrors, where portraits of the imperial family once hung. Most have been removed or defaced. Only hers remains largely untouched, except for a deep gash across the mouth. It's a fitting metaphor. For a while, she was his regent in all but name, she whispered in his ear. Arranged marriages, orchestrated alliances. She believed he was her puppet. And for a time, maybe he was. But even puppets learn to cut their strings. The tension between them grew over the years. He resented her control. She resented his independence. Their quarrels became public, then dangerous. She accused his lovers of sorcery. He accused her of plotting against him. She slapped him once in front of the Senate. He smiled. That same night, her favorite maid was executed for treasonous laundry. One evening, he invited her to a dinner cruise on a lavishly decorated boat. Lavishly and secretly rigged to sink. That plan failed, she swam to shore. So, he tried again. More directly. The next morning, she was found in her villa. Stabbed. The guards claimed self-defense. The dagger was still in her chest. You stand now at the garden where she was buried quickly, quietly, without ceremony. No public mourning. No state funeral. Just silence. The emperor never spoke of her again. But he commissioned a play, just weeks later, about a noblewoman betrayed by her son. He played the son. Historians still debate whether this was tragedy or confession. And you begin to realize something unsettling. He was never taught cruelty. He learned it, observed it, perfected it. The court was his classroom, the empire his stage, and his education was just beginning. You leave the garden where his mother's grave lies, weeds already clawing through the marble. Not a single flower, not a single coin. No offerings from grieving citizens or loyal retainers, only dry dirt and silence. It's the silence that lingers. As you walk away, the path under your feet feels thinner, more precarious, because from here on, the emperor's mask isn't just slipping, it's gone. The moment he had full control, no mother, no regents, no advisors with spines, the palace changed. You can feel it. The opulence stayed, but the energy darkened. Once a place of politics and performance, now it pulsed with something else, something darker, more primal. He wasn't merely a ruler anymore. He was a god in his own script. And in this script, everyone else was disposable. You're summoned to the Hall of Marble Tongues. No, not a metaphor. Real tongues cast in silver, gold. Even onyx mounted on plaques along the wall, each one labeled with a name. You don't need to ask. Those names belonged to people who said the wrong thing. The emperor had their actual tongues cut out, then immortalized in precious metal. It's his idea of art. At the end of the hall, two senators perform a debate, one arguing for the glory of the emperor, the other against. But there's no danger, both sides are scripted. Written by the emperor himself. He plays the crowd, clapping loudly, pretending to be surprised at his own brilliance. You're expected to laugh, to cheer, maybe even cry. Your emotions, like everything else, are now state property. But the court isn't just about theatrics. It's about terror. Whispers of death echo louder than the music. You walk through a corridor lined with statues, each one a perfect likeness of a former advisor. Frozen mid-gesture. The likenesses are uncanny. You realize these were taken from death masks. One has tears carved down his cheeks. There's one door in the palace that's always locked. They call it the Chamber of Petitions. It's where citizens were once allowed to submit grievances directly to the emperor. These days, it's a joke. People still drop their scrolls in, but no one believes he reads them. Rumor has it he uses them to light his incense burners. One servant claimed he read one out loud at a banquet for fun, mocking a farmer's plea for grain while sipping from a ruby-encrusted chalice. Still, some hope lingers. You spot a young woman slipping a folded note into the box. Her eyes are wide with belief, or maybe desperation. It doesn't matter. You know where that letter will end up, fuel for fire. A footnote in his amusement. And then, the coup de grace of this section, the infamous coronation of excess. That's what people call it now. In hushed tones. Officially, it was just another festival. But it marked the moment when everyone knew there was no more restraint. No more illusion of order. Only his will. You walk into the arena where it took place. It's massive room for tens of thousands. The seats are cracked, weeds pushing through. But if you close your eyes, You can still hear the screams, the applause, the wild music. For 3 days, the emperor staged what he called the divine performance. He entered dressed as Jupiter himself, wearing a crown of live snakes and robes made from silk dyed with crushed sea snails. He declared he would conquer not just the world, but pleasure itself. That meant contests of gluttony, nude chariot races, and a dramatic reenactment of his own birth, complete with a giant golden egg that cracked open to reveal him, reclining nude. Doused in myrrh, he sang his own hymn, off-key. For 3 hours, people clapped. They had to. One man who looked bored was thrown to the elephants. That wasn't a figure of speech. The emperor had imported actual elephants for the event. Historians still argue whether the elephants were trained or simply angry. At the feast that followed, the emperor served dishes so opulent they became legends. Boiled swan stuffed with pearls, honey-glazed dormice arranged in the shape of constellations, flamingo tongues, peacocks dipped in silver leaf. The poor outside the arena starved. The emperor proclaimed this was a celebration of divine generosity. No one laughed. Not because it wasn't funny, but because no one dared. You walk through the dining hall where the banquet occurred. The floor is still sticky. Despite the centuries, a scent lingers: spiced wine, rotted meat, and smoke. One of the tables has been preserved. Its surface a mosaic of scenes from the emperor's dreams. They're mostly nightmares. One shows a headless senator dancing. Another, a crowd of citizens worshiping a burning tree that somehow has his face, even in his most indulgent moments. The emperor couldn't escape his paranoia. Pleasure was never enough. He needed dominance, worship, fear. That's why he insisted the court applaud his harp performances every note, no matter how flat. That's why he forced dignitaries from other lands to crawl, not walk, into his presence. He was not content to be admired. He wanted submission. But perhaps the most disturbing part, he was funny. Not always, but sometimes sharp, clever, quick. He could cut someone down with a single word, then reward them with gold if they laughed along. He told riddles that no one dared solve. He once made a senator wear a goose costume for a week, just to prove a point about loyalty. The senator complied. Of course he did. Everyone did. And through it all, the empire kept functioning. Roads were built, taxes collected, armies moved. That's what frightens you most, how the machinery of government can keep running, even when the man at the top is spinning in madness. People adapted. They always do. A strange thing begins to happen as you watch this circus of depravity unfold. You stop being shocked. Your senses dull. What once horrified you now just washes over you. The silver tongues, the edible peacocks, the screaming entertainers. It becomes noise, excess fatigue. And that's when you realize that's the true power of his debauchery. Not the spectacle itself, but its numbing repetition, the transformation of horror into routine. Because once horror becomes routine, anything is possible. You descend a staircase worn smooth by centuries of silk slippers and sandaled feet, past torches that flicker with that perfumed, oily flame the palace prefers. It doesn't quite smell like fire. It smells like luxury orange blossom and blood. You're heading toward the hidden wing now. No senators here. No poets or generals. Only the emperor's private world. And here, the rules of Rome stop applying entirely. The corridor opens into a series of rooms, each more decadent than the last. Murals of Dionysian revelry drip from the walls, wine goblets overflowing, satyrs and nymphs entwined. And at the center of every scene, a golden-haired figure unmistakably modeled after the emperor himself. He's always the focus, always the god. Even when the scenes veer into the deeply strange, and they often do, his painted face remains serene, detached, like he's floating above it all. He probably was. The first room you step into is called the Room of Roses. A domed ceiling curves overhead, from which thousands of dried rose petals still hang, preserved by time and a particularly aggressive wax resin. The petals fall slowly, artificially released by servants hiding in alcoves you can barely see. This room was built for seduction, for spectacle. The floor beneath your feet is a mosaic of lovers locked in acrobatic embraces that would make your yoga instructor wince. It's said that this was the site of the emperor's most infamous orgies. But don't imagine candlelight and sensuality. Imagine theater again, excess choreographed down to the breath. Senators and slaves in identical masks. Everyone equal in shame, though not in consequence. If you pleased the emperor, you left with gifts. If you didn't, you might leave missing teeth. You walk through it slowly, and for a moment, you hear the echoes, laughter too loud, moans too rehearsed, and beneath it all, the low, lazy plucking of a harp. He always liked to have music during these scenes. It made everything feel less real, more operatic. Next is the feast room. You hesitate before entering. This room had a reputation even among the court, and not in a good way. The table is still there. Absurdly long. Designed for excess. Platters carved from lapis lazuli. Goblets so large they required 2 hands. This isn't a dining room, it's a battlefield. Overeating wasn't indulgence here, it was obedience. The emperor would watch from a raised platform, his own plate mostly untouched, while guests stuffed themselves to sickness. If someone vomited, he applauded. If someone passed out, he ordered the servants to dress them as statues and leave them standing in the corner until the end of the night. Once, he supposedly invited a delegation of philosophers and served them only meat shaped like books and scrolls. He laughed for hours. They didn't. And the food. Exotic doesn't cover it. Brains of ostrich, hummingbird tongues, sea urchins drowned in honey. Foods no one liked, but everyone pretended to. One guest dared to say the jellyfish dish was a bit bland. He was made into a centerpiece the next evening, painted gold and posed mid-bite, forever captured in the moment of his final complaint. Historians still argue whether these events truly happened as described. Some say it's impossible, a form of libel, a posthumous smear campaign. Others argue the records are too consistent across sources to be entirely false. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. But when you're in this room, staring at the long, cursed banquet table, it feels entirely possible, maybe even inevitable. Beyond the feast room lies the chamber of reflection. Not reflection as in philosophy, he had no patience for that, but reflection as in mirrors. Walls of them, ceilings of them. The floor is black glass, polished so clean you can see your own pores. This is where the emperor came to admire himself. Not a metaphor. He would spend hours here, walking slowly, naked, reciting his own poetry, and asking his attendants to rate each verse and each pose on a scale of 1 to 10. The only correct answer was 11. You find a diary entry etched into a wall tile, probably by a servant, written in the margins of madness. He asked me today if the sun was jealous of him. I said yes. He smiled. I wept. And then just when you think you've seen the worst, you reach the room known only as the theater. No applause greets you here. No laughter. The seats are arranged in a circle. The stage in the center no bigger than a wrestling ring. There's a trapdoor in the middle. The air smells faintly of wax, sweat, and metal. This is where the emperor staged his private performances, sometimes as actor, sometimes as director, sometimes as something else entirely. You walk the circumference. The marble seats are stained in places wine. Maybe not. The stories say he once forced a group of senators to act in a play he had written about loyalty and betrayal. The twist. One of them didn't know he'd been cast as the traitor. At the play's climax, the execution scene was real. The audience applauded, because what else could they do? On another occasion, he supposedly reenacted the fall of Troy with slaves as the Trojans and himself as Achilles. The fire was real. The screams were real. His toga caught flame, and he laughed so hard he dislocated his jaw. A physician had to set it while he continued reciting Homer. You sit in one of the stone seats. It's cold. Despite the heat outside, you try to picture the emperor here, arms raised, wearing a golden mask of his own face, surrounded by actors too afraid to breathe. You try to understand the appeal. And disturbingly, it's not about sex, not about food, not even about cruelty. It's about control. The ability to shape reality to your whim, to make others perform your fantasies, to be so powerful that the world bends around you like heat on stone. He didn't indulge because he was weak. He indulged because he was bored, and because boredom is the most dangerous hunger of all. You rise and exit the theater, stepping back into the corridor. The sounds and smells of the palace press in again. Familiar now. You've seen the empire's underbelly, and you're starting to feel numb, because that's what it does. It overwhelms, it disorients, and then it seduces. And the worst part, you're beginning to see why no one ever said no. You emerge from the emperor's hidden theater with a tightness in your chest and a sharp awareness of your surroundings. Everything feels just a little off now, each statue too lifelike, each tapestry too silent. You've just witnessed the intimate stages of decadence. But what's truly chilling is how ordinary it all starts to feel. Because beyond the perverse opulence and velvet-covered depravity, daily life in the palace still ticks forward. The empire functions. Rome moves. And this is just how things are now. You turn a corner and step directly into a corridor lined with portraits, not of emperors past, nor of gods, but of lovers, painted in various states of undress, sometimes mid-kiss, sometimes mid-weeping. The emperor insisted every lover he took be immortalized on canvas. It's impossible to say how many there are. Some rooms are still sealed. Others burned when emotions turned or power dynamics shifted. And here's where you realize something. No one was safe from being loved by the emperor. senators' sons, slave boys, gladiators, married noblewomen, even a foreign emissary once, though his sudden departure back home suggests the affair didn't end on a soft note. The emperor's passions were unpredictable, overwhelming, and terminally dangerous. Being chosen was as much a curse as a privilege. He didn't court. He possessed, and when he tired of someone, it was never a simple farewell, no quiet fade-out. Love, for him, was always followed by ruin. You remember reading about Sporus, a young boy the emperor allegedly had castrated and married in a public ceremony, dressing him in the robes of his late wife and calling him by her name. The wedding was attended by the full court. There was cake. The guests smiled. Historians still argue whether it was madness, grief, or some grotesque attempt at romantic resurrection. Whatever the case, Sporus remained at the emperor's side, painted, perfumed, paraded until even that living doll fell from favor. You enter what the palace archivists refer to as the Chamber of Departed Affections. The name is ironic. The reality is grim. Inside are tokens, locks of hair, rings, scraps of fabric, each item tagged with a name, a date, and sometimes a final word. Disloyal, ungrateful, frowned during music. You reach for a silver brooch labeled simply, he hesitated. He hesitated. You sit for a moment on the bench near the window, where the sunlight cuts through the dust in long, golden beams. Outside, Rome stretches toward the horizon, stone and smoke and motion. But here in this room, time feels stalled, like a sentence with no punctuation. This is what happens when love is wielded as a weapon, when affection is filtered through absolute power, when obsession replaces intimacy. The emperor didn't just crave admiration. He required it, inhaling it like air, needing it from lovers and strangers alike. And it wasn't enough for people to love him. He had to orchestrate the how and the when and the volume of their love. Anything less was betrayal. You recall the infamous banquet held in honor of a new favorite, an ex-gladiator named Aelius. A man of striking beauty, they said, with a crooked smile and scars like jewelry. The emperor adored him. For 6 days. On the 7th, during a poetry contest, Aelius misquoted a line from one of the emperor's compositions. Just a single word off. The emperor smiled, raised a cup, toasted him, and had him strangled with the harp string used in the performance. The crowd applauded. As rehearsed, a new favorite was introduced the next day. You passed through the baths next. Not just any baths, these were personal, separate from the grand public complexes. Here, everything was scented, tinted, glowing, pools of wine, steam infused with cinnamon and mint, onyx walls carved with waves. And statues, oh, the statues. Every lover, again, in marble this time, life-sized, many nude, frozen in a moment of ecstasy, or terror, or some uncanny blend of both. Their eyes follow you, not literally, but it feels that way. You wade through memory here, through ghosts solidified in stone. One alcove houses a smaller pool, known only as the garden. It's said this is where the emperor hosted his more intimate gatherings, select guests only, where wine flowed until reason evaporated and no one left quite the same. One poet wrote that he entered a man of verse and left a whisper with no spine. You wonder what he meant by that. You're not sure you want to know, because there is a pattern here, a vicious cycle beneath the perfume and poetry. The emperor loved intensely, then destroyed completely. He elevated people like gods, then cast them into shadows darker than death. And the court adapted. They learned to smile through their fear, to compliment without end, to anticipate every mood swing like ship captains studying storm clouds. You meet a former servant in the records hall, her hands still stained from ink. She tells you, in a low voice, that the emperor once demanded a love letter from every single courtier, once a month. Failure to submit a sufficiently emotional piece was considered treason. She wrote 37 forges a week. Most were based on old poems, recycled with different names. She shrugs. He didn't read them. He just liked the idea of being adored. Of course, not all rejections were elegant. One general refused the emperor's advances. Respectfully, quietly. The emperor responded by declaring war on a neighboring province, one the general's son happened to govern. The province was crushed. The son was paraded through Rome in chains. The general, well, he stopped refusing after that. You're starting to see the shape of the emperor's heart, if you can call it that. Not a chamber of warmth, but a hall of mirrors, endless reflections. None truly real. His relationships were echo chambers. You didn't matter unless you reflected him. There was no you, only how you made him feel. And yet some stayed. Some loved him, or convinced themselves they did. Maybe they believed in the fantasy. Maybe they thought they could change him. Maybe they were just afraid. You think about that a lot. Because now, as you walk back toward the brighter corridors, The official spaces, the hall where the emperor holds court. You begin to understand something deeper. His debauchery wasn't confined to flesh and food and theater. It touched everything. It turned love into theater. It turned relationships into performance. He didn't just want to be loved. He wanted to own love. And in this empire, he did. You return to the main court, your mind still echoing with the memory of marble lovers and mirrored obsession. The emperor's public life, if you can even call it that, was just as saturated with extravagance as his private chambers. But now you see it differently. Every decree, every speech, every procession, none of it was about governance. It was performance art. Governance was the pretext. Theater was the obsession. Today is an imperial address. You're ushered into the grand forum of Orient declarations, a hall with walls gilded so heavily that the light physically hurts to look at. Courtiers line the edges, their faces set in carefully rehearsed admiration. Senators fidget in their ceremonial sashes. And above them all, on a balcony of gold leaf and carved lapis lions, stands the emperor wearing, of course, an entirely transparent robe. You've grown used to this. He often likes to shock. Today he reads a decree banning negative expressions in public, effective immediately. Frowning is now illegal. Sighing is suspect. Looking tired is interpreted as dissent. No one reacts. That, too, is illegal. And just like that, the law exists. You think about the process for a normal Roman edict. Debates, votes, consultation. Here, it's a glance and a whim. Yesterday he outlawed ungenerous laughter. Last week, he temporarily banned left-handed walking in the palace corridors because he had a dream in which left-footed demons plotted his downfall. He's since forgotten the dream, but the law remains on the books. The court scribes can barely keep up. One assistant is said to have fainted after copying 37 new laws in a single day. The emperor rewarded him with a silk tunic and a goose. The goose was for companionship. He named it Marcus. Historians still argue whether the emperor was genuinely insane or just playing the world's most dangerous joke. Some suggest that he was deeply strategic, using absurdity to distract, disorient, disarm. If everything is nonsense, nothing can be predicted. If nothing can be predicted, no one can challenge him. You can't rebel against a tornado. Others believe he was simply broken, born into too much, too young, too often, raised to believe he was the center of the cosmos, and slowly consumed by that gravitational pull. They say the stars don't care who orbits them, but a man like this, he demanded worship with every rotation. You exit the hall as the emperor concludes his speech with a 3-minute standing ovation led by guards with whips. You wander into the gardens, where statues of himself adorn every path. They're not all the same pose. Either, some are heroic, others are contemplative. A few depict him weeping while holding a globe of the earth. One particularly bold statue shows him riding a dolphin while holding lightning bolts in both hands. He commissioned that one after a particularly vivid dream, according to his astrologer, who may or may not have fabricated the entire thing to avoid execution. Smart move. Honestly, you pass a group of foreign diplomats being led on a tour. Their smiles are brittle, their compliments mechanical. They've likely spent weeks studying the emperor's preferences, rehearsing greetings, and memorizing forbidden phrases. One wrong step, one misunderstood gesture, and they might be returning home in small boxes. You can't blame them for overacting. The emperor once made an ambassador from Parthia dress as a centaur during a banquet. It was meant to symbolize unity, he said. The ambassador's country didn't see it that way. Tensions rose. Borders flared. The emperor responded by sending a gift basket of figs and a handwritten poem titled, "Why You're Wrong." You pause by a marble bench and sit down. Nearby, 2 children play, watched over by a nursemaid. Even they know better than to laugh too loud or too slow. The air feels heavy, thick with expectation. Everyone is always performing, always calculating. Even the birds seem to chirp in rhythm. But this isn't just about power. It's about surveillance. The emperor's spies aren't soldiers or thugs, they're actors, musicians, waitstaff, the people who hear whispers, the people who are always present but never seen. The baker who delivers almond cakes might also deliver names. The woman pouring wine could be memorizing your size. It's a palace of mirrors. Remember, and every mirror reflects back to him. One senator's downfall began with a raised eyebrow during a play. That was it. He didn't laugh fast enough. The emperor noticed. Within a week, the senator was declared emotionally treasonous, and his estate was seized. His family was forced to reenact his execution in a court drama called The Man Who Doubted. It ran for 11 nights. You walk through the Hall of Proclamations. Every wall is engraved with laws, poems, jokes, love letters, all written by the emperor, or claimed to be. You suspect a few were ghost-written. They're uneven in quality. One verse about clouds is oddly moving. Another, a limerick about frogs and betrayal, is less so. But that's the point. It doesn't matter if they're good. They're his. That makes them sacred. One courtier once compared the emperor's writing to that of Homer. He was awarded a villa. Another compared it to a market jingle. He was fed to swans. You didn't know swans could do that. Apparently, they can. You stop at a small inscription tucked in a corner. It reads, "A true emperor is the author of reality." You stare at it for a long moment. That, you realize, is his governing philosophy. Not justice, not duty, authorship. He writes the story. He casts the roles. If you exist in his world, you exist on his terms. And here's the terrifying truth. It works. Rome hasn't collapsed. The roads are still busy. The legions still march. Bread is still baked. The machine churns on. Most citizens still cheer at the games, still offer prayers, still trade gossip about the emperor's latest pet panther or golden chariot. The absurdity becomes ambient, normalized, routine. You once read a phrase in a dusty manuscript. Tyranny is the slow dulling of the senses. Now you understand it. You've seen the cruelty, the madness, the whimsy, the bloodshed, and the farce. And you've adjusted. The emperor has done what every mad ruler dreams of doing. He's made the madness feel inevitable. And you catch your reflection in a polished bronze shield. Your posture is straighter, your smile more measured, your eyes wary. Without realizing it, you've started performing. 2. Because survival here isn't about loyalty. It's about calibration. Knowing when to laugh, when to cry, when to vanish, and above all, knowing when to applaud. You wake the next morning to the sound of distant trumpets and frantic pacing in the corridors. Something's happened again. The palace doesn't sleep. It just naps between catastrophes. Servants whisper. Guards exchange sidelong glances. A senator has been arrested for inauthentic delight. The emperor declared his clapping lacked sincerity. By breakfast, the senator's name has been erased from all official records. By lunch, no one even remembers him. Except you. You remember, but you also don't say a word. This is the part of court life no one puts in the scrolls. The quiet terror of forgetting. Not just the names of the dead, but your own face. Your own instincts. You smile because you must. You praise because it's expected. And every day, you lose another piece of yourself to the show. Today, the emperor will receive treatment from his physician. You're invited to observe not because he wants advice, but because audiences soothe him. You're beginning to understand this pattern. Even his illnesses are performances. You enter the Hall of Vital Vapors, where the emperor lounges on a bed of crushed velvet, surrounded by apothecaries and trembling physicians. He's draped in silk so thin it might as well be mist. His wrists painted with gold leaf to encourage circulation. According to some recent theory he likely invented during a wine nap. A physician reads his pulse. Another gently wafts sandalwood smoke beneath his nostrils. A third begins reciting an epic poem in Latin meter, which supposedly aligns his humors. The emperor murmurs. More melancholy. Please, I feel too content. The poem abruptly shifts into a tragedy. Someone weeps in the background. It might be the harpist. The emperor's obsession with health is less about fear of death and more about ritual. Another stage. Another costume. He's been known to declare himself too divine to suffer ordinary ailments, but also demands 10 different tonics each day. He once drank molten gold dissolved in vinegar because an alchemist told him it purified ambition. He vomited for 3 hours and wrote a haiku about it. Historians still debate whether he was searching for immortality or simply bored. Either way, his body became a canvas for absurdity. Leech therapy became blood art. Herbal infusions became scented fountains. At one point, he wore a necklace made entirely of dried beetles to absorb impure dreams. You find that oddly poetic and completely insane. After the treatment ends, he rises to his feet, seemingly reborn. The audience applauds. Of course they do. A juggler is summoned to celebrate his recovery. Despite the juggler's obvious hangover and visible limp, the emperor claps. The juggler drops a knife. Everyone freezes. Then, surprisingly, the emperor laughs. A deep, wheezing sound that seems to shake the golden drapes. He waves the juggler away. I like my clowns clumsy, he says. They remind me of the gods. No one's sure if that was a joke. The juggler faints anyway. You follow him as he strolls into the next chamber, a long gallery of portraits, each one of himself in various heroic mythologies. Him as Hercules, strangling serpents. Him as Apollo, strumming a lyre while surrounded by doves. Him as Mercury, delivering messages to himself. In the middle of the gallery stands the real piece de resistance, a full statue of the emperor as Jupiter, life-size, but 30 feet tall, lightning bolt in one hand, mirror in the other. He nods at it solemnly. He understands me, he says. You nod. 2. What else can you do? Later that day, you're invited to a new ceremony. He calls it the Hour of Radiance. No one knows what it means, but everyone pretends they do. The court gathers in the central atrium, where the floor has been polished until it gleams like liquid obsidian. The emperor appears atop a rotating platform, dressed in a robe of woven fireflies. Yes, real ones. He smells of jasmine and freshly baked bread. He raises his arms. Today, I rename the sun, he declares. It shall now be called Felix, because it makes me happy. A herald repeats the announcement with solemn gravity. You feel your face stretch into a smile. The sun is now Felix. You can live with that. But then he turns to the court. And because I, too, bring light, I shall be called Radiant Father. The applause begins before the words finish leaving his lips. A chorus of sycophants chants, Radiant Father, Radiant Father. You join in, not because you believe, but because belief has become irrelevant. He steps down and walks through the crowd, blessing people at random with vague compliments. Your ears are symmetrical. Your elbows hold potential. You look like someone I once saw in a dream. Each compliment is received like divine scripture. He reaches you. His eyes lock with yours. You blink very responsibly, he says. You almost thank him. Later that night, you attend a private supper in the sky room, so named because the ceiling has been painted to reflect the stars above in real time. Servants rotate it manually every hour. They complain of dizziness, but no one listens. The emperor dines alone on a throne-like chair shaped like a seashell. Everyone else eats in silence, watching him chew. He hums between bites, sometimes moaning as if in divine ecstasy. At one point, he throws a fig at a senator and declares, "Catch it with your dignity." The senator fails. Laughter erupts. That senator is never seen again. You excuse yourself and wander the terrace. The night air is cool. You stare at the stars, wondering what it must be like to live without constant fear, without needing to smile on command, to laugh on cue. You can't even remember what your natural laugh sounds like anymore. Behind you, the party continues. The emperor has begun reciting a dream he had where dolphins told him the secrets of the universe. Everyone nods as if they understand. One man actually cries. You assume he's just exhausted. And somewhere inside yourself, a question flickers. Is this sustainable? Can a society truly function under the weight of one man's unchecked imagination? Can art and law and affection survive when all of it is bent through a single warped lens? Maybe not, but maybe it doesn't need to. Maybe the emperor doesn't care if it lasts. Maybe he just wants it to sparkle as it burns. You head to your chambers, your head spinning from incense, deception, and too many smiling lies. You lock the door behind you not because it's safe, but because it feels like you're drawing a line between yourself and the rest of the palace. But even in the dark, his voice lingers. The laws, the praise, the laughter, they all sound like him now. And you wonder how long before your thoughts do. 2. Morning in the palace doesn't come gently. It blares to life with trumpets, dancers, and citrus-scented steam wafting from pipes built into the marble. You wake not because the sun rises, but because the emperor has declared it should, and anything he declares becomes reality, or at least something close enough to pretend. Today, you're summoned early. That's never good. The last person summoned at dawn was made to perform a dramatic reenactment of their own tax records, with interpretive dance. The emperor called it Art of the Audit. It ran twice, as you shuffle through the corridor toward the audience chamber. You notice the guards are quieter than usual. Not sullen, not alert, just hushed, like they're holding their breath. Something's different. Inside, the emperor sits cross-legged on a pile of velvet cushions, wearing only a gold circlet and a robe stitched with images of birds. The room is empty except for you, the guards, and a scroll reader who looks like he hasn't blinked since last week. You, the emperor says, voice like honey poured over a blade. We are bored. Tell us a city that no longer exists. You freeze, not out of fear, but confusion. He repeats the demand, this time with a faint tilt of the head, like a curious cat considering whether to pounce. You blurt out, Carthage. He claps once. Good. Now, let's go destroy one. You assume it's a metaphor. It isn't. The rest of the morning is spent reviewing reports from cities across the empire, grain quotas, weather patterns, astrological alignments. He pauses at one. A coastal town known for olive exports and insufficient appreciation of imperial poetry. They didn't clap last year, he murmurs. And just like that, their fate is sealed. You watch as messengers are dispatched. Troops will march. The town will burn, all because a poetry reading ended in silence instead of applause. Historians still argue whether this campaign ever happened, or whether it was simply threatened into myth. But contemporary accounts suggest smoke was seen rising from that province for days, and no olives arrived the next harvest. It's not about punishment. It's about performance. The empire is a stage, and the emperor must always be its brightest light. Anyone who dims that light, even by omission, becomes part of a different act. The tragedy. As you walk through the gardens that afternoon, you begin to understand something deeper about his rule. This isn't governance by whim. It's governance by symbolism. Every punishment, every decree, every bizarre indulgence, they all mean something, even if only to him. When a senator arrives late, he's made to wear a clock around his neck for a week. When a court musician plays a wrong note, he's sent to live in silence for a month, no speaking. No music, just silence, enforced by masked attendants. It's not enough for mistakes to be corrected. They must be transformed into rituals, into warnings. You pass the reflecting pool and watch as two generals are forced to wrestle in slow motion while reciting imperial laws backward. The emperor watches from a silk hammock, sipping chilled pomegranate juice. He smiles whenever one of them mispronounces a word. This, you realize, is discipline as theater, but it's not just his enemies who suffer under symbolism. The emperor himself is a prisoner of his own myth. Every gesture must be meaningful, every word laced with majesty. He no longer is, he only performs. He once tripped on a stair and then had the stair declared rebellious terrain. It was demolished. He later claimed it had been possessed by envy. He writes his own history as he lives it. You've seen the scrolls, the official annals scrubbed clean of dissent, padded with praise. He rewrites defeats as divine tests, mistakes as metaphors. The fire that destroyed a section of the palace last winter, officially recorded as a cleansing flame sent by the gods to purify weak architecture. You stumble into a library, one of the few corners of the palace where some whisper of truth might still linger. Shelves upon shelves of curated texts, many marked for imperial eyes only. You sneak a peek at one. It's a biography of the emperor, written by the emperor. In it, he refers to himself in the third person as the chosen flame. You check the index. Modesty is listed, but the page is blank. There's a section in the biography titled "The Day the Sky Cried for Me." It recounts a thunderstorm that ruined a parade, which he interpreted as the heavens mourning his sorrows. He later commissioned a statue of himself holding back clouds. You leave the library before you laugh out loud. Back in the court chamber, you observe one of his more elaborate punishments. A group of minor officials who failed to color coordinate their robes are now painted literally with imperial-approved pigments. They stand on pedestals like living statues, expressions frozen in mock reverence. Occasionally, the emperor walks by and corrects their poses with a delicate flick of his hand. You wonder what happens if someone sneezes. By evening, the emperor has ordered an opera, not a traditional one. This performance will feature animals in costume and the reimagining of his birth as a celestial event. You are, somehow, cast as the North Star. Your only job is to stand still and look divine. A leopard in a wig plays the role of destiny. A goat, wearing sandals, plays fortune. The emperor plays himself, of course, and rides in on a mechanical cloud, surrounded by children blowing bubbles. At the climax, he declares, "I was not born, I was composed." The audience rises in applause. You do, too. Your star costume squeaks when you move. Later, in the privacy of your chamber, you stare at the wall and think about everything you've seen. The punishments, the spectacles, the rewriting of reality. You wonder how long it will take before all of this seeps into your bones and becomes normal. Because here's the truth. Madness, when practiced long enough, looks like culture. And the emperor, he's created a culture of chaos, a civilization of symbolism. Even his enemies must speak in metaphor. Even his victims must applaud their own downfall. And somewhere in that maze of meaning, the real Rome is slipping away. You drift into sleep wondering, what happens when the emperor no longer knows the difference between performance and power? What happens when everyone else forgets? 2. The next morning, there's no fanfare, no parades, no proclamations, no trumpet bursts of fruit-scented air. It's quiet, eerily so. You wake to stillness, a rare moment where the palace seems to be holding its breath. And that silence, in a place built on noise, is not relief. It's a warning. Something's wrong. Or maybe something's about to happen. You can't tell which is worse. You pull on your robe and slip into the corridor. Even the guards look confused, glancing at each other like actors who've misplaced the script. One whispers, "He hasn't emerged yet." That alone is terrifying. The emperor rises with the sun, usually before it. He greets it, names it, sometimes renames it. But today, no emperor, just a hushed palace, as if the very walls are waiting for permission to speak. Eventually, a servant appears, looking pale and breathless. His radiance is contemplating, she says. That could mean anything. In the past, it has meant anything from a new tax on eyebrows to a surprise execution poetry slam. Hours pass. The court convenes, unsure whether to sit, stand, or just collapse inward like a nervous souffle. You all hover like electrons around a nucleus that refuses to appear. And then, at last, the emperor glides in. He's barefoot. He wears a crown of ivy and a robe made entirely of translucent gauze. His skin glows with something not light, not health, but intention. He does not speak. Instead, he walks to the center of the hall, raises his arms, and stares upward. No one moves. Then, slowly, he begins to dance. Not well. He spins and dips and twirls with abandon, arms flailing like drunken vines. His face is blank. The court stares in stunned silence. Is this madness? Is it art? Is it both? Or neither? You glance around. People begin clapping. Tentatively, you join in, careful not to be the last or the loudest. A senator sobs. Someone collapses, overcome by either awe or anxiety, maybe both. The emperor spins faster. After 10 minutes, he stops. Breathing heavily, he declares, "That was grief." A pause. "For the empire," he adds. No one knows what to do. Is it an apology? A critique? A threat? He sits. "We shall fast for one day," he says, "to mourn potential." And just like that, the court is dismissed. You shuffle out with the rest, bewildered. The palace cooks are already weeping. A day without feasting is unthinkable. One of the wine merchants is seen praying. You spend the afternoon wandering. Everywhere, servants replace the usual silks with dark cloth. Flowers are removed. Statues are veiled. Even the birds seem to sing in minor keys. The emperor has declared sadness, and so the world must comply. But later, as dusk slips through the colonnades, you find yourself drawn to the lower courtyard, the one with the black fountains and obsidian benches. It's rarely used, which makes it perfect for secrets. You're not alone. A group of officials gathers there quietly, nervously. You recognize faces that are usually smiling too hard. Now they wear the expression of people who finally admitted to themselves they're in a sinking ship. Whispers drift toward you. It has to end. He's not even pretending anymore. Rome cannot be a stage forever. One voice, soft but firm. He'll destroy everything. And there it is. The whisper that changes everything. The moment when the line between survival and action starts to blur. Historians still argue about when the real conspiracies began. Some say the very first year of his reign. Others point to the death of his mother. But many agree that it was around this time when grief dances and starvation becomes performance that the court began to contemplate the unthinkable, removing the emperor, not with votes, not with persuasion, but with force. You return to your quarters shaken. You've grown so used to watching the madness unfold like a tragic play that you forgot something vital. People break, even sycophants, even cowards, even you. But plotting against a man who sees himself as divine is a dangerous game, not just because he has spies, but because he has devotion. Many still believe in him, genuinely, fanatically. They see the madness as vision, the cruelty as courage, the chaos as charisma. That night, the emperor calls for a private feast, a farewell to grief. He says, "You dress carefully, not too somber, not too celebratory. You must reflect the new mood, solemn optimism." That's the phrase he used. The feast is surreal. The tables are set with black tablecloths and glowing glassware. Candles float midair by hidden strings. Every dish is both sweet and bitter. Candied lemons, honeyed turnips with ashes, desserts shaped like skulls. The emperor enters wearing a cloak made of raven feathers and a laurel crown dipped in ink. He smiles. "We have mourned," he says. "Now, we rebirth." No one dares to ask what that means. Between courses, a performance begins. Actors retell the story of a great king who weeps so hard that the moon drowns. It ends with the king becoming a phoenix. The emperor claps so hard his ring flies off. No one returns it. It's sacred now. But you notice something. The glances, the tension, the hand on a dagger just a moment too long. Something has shifted. The performance is cracking. The audience has begun to think for itself. You realize you're not alone in your dread anymore. Others are starting to wake up. The illusion is growing thin. The costumes are fraying. And the emperor, for all his grandiosity, looks smaller tonight. He slouches. His voice falters. He repeats himself. Maybe he senses it, too. Maybe he knows. After the feast, he lingers in the hall, watching his reflection in a silver shield. He touches his face gently, almost like he's unsure whether he's still real. He whispers something. You strain to hear. "I will become myth," he says. "And myths never die. You back away. The mask has slipped. And behind it, not a god, not even a man, just a frightened boy, desperate to keep the lights on. The following days unfold like a fever dream, bright, loud, and increasingly fragile. You can feel it in the way people walk, the way they speak, the way their eyes dart toward shadows and doorways. Something is building. The Emperor can feel it too. You sense it in the tightening of his smile, in the forced levity of his commands, in the lengthening pauses before his laughter. He's afraid. And when a god-king fears, the world shakes. It begins with signs and portents. Always does. A comet appears in the sky, a smudge of white trailing like a divine scratch across the stars. The Emperor declares it a blessing. His astrologer calls it the tale of imperial fortune. The court nods. But behind closed doors, people whisper what everyone knows. Comets are never good. So the Emperor calls for purification, not spiritual, but theatrical. You're summoned to the Temple of Reflections, a shrine he had built for the sole purpose of watching his own image flicker in polished obsidian. Here, he performs a cleansing ritual, assisted by dancers, poets, and a man dressed as the god Mercury who reads aloud from a scroll made of rose petals. He strips to the waist and bathes in milk, then honey, then wine, to cleanse the sins of the people, he says. Everyone applauds. You begin to realize the Emperor doesn't see himself as corrupt. He sees himself as burdened by your corruption. You are the sin. He is the sponge. After the bath, he orders that every citizen of Rome must chant a praise verse at sunset. Daily, the words are printed and distributed on papyrus. We are fortunate to bask in the warmth of his wisdom. Miss a chant. That's treason. Mock the chant. Death. Even thinking against the chant feels dangerous now. You find yourself repeating it silently, just to drown out the anxiety. Meanwhile, the Emperor tightens his circle. Fewer guests, fewer invitations. He demands that his food be tasted by 5 separate people. He sleeps in different rooms each night. He accuses his bed linens of betrayal. One night, he blames the stars for malicious symmetry and has all astrology charts burned except for his own. You're not surprised when the executions begin again. First, a poet is accused of using too many metaphors. Then a noblewoman is found guilty of insufficient enthusiasm during a harp recital. A general is arrested for owning a map with slightly faded ink interpreted as a secret message. The punishments are swift and bizarre. A man is sewn into a sack with a painting of a cat. Another is forced to recite his entire ancestry while standing in a barrel of olives. These are not punishments. These are warnings, not just to the guilty, but to everyone. You remember a phrase scrawled once on the underside of a desk? Obedience is a performance. Forget your lines and you disappear. The Emperor begins holding midnight audiences. He paces. He sweats. He talks to invisible crowds. They plot in the shadows, he says. But I invented the shadows. His words don't need to make sense. They only need to frighten. One night, he wakes the palace with screams. You rush into the hallway along with dozens of others. He stands in the center of the corridor, drenched in wine and wearing a crown of thorns made from broken furniture. I have seen the betrayal, he whispers. I saw it in my soup. A servant nods. Your insight is divine. The next morning, that servant is executed for knowing too much. The Emperor now refuses to walk unless trumpets precede him. He orders all mirrors removed except one, his favorite, which he refers to as my brother. He speaks to it often. You've heard him. Sometimes he weeps, and then the visions begin. He claims to see omens in candle smoke. One day, a curl of flame resembles a serpent. That's the traitor, he says. I knew it. I knew it. He writes a list of names on the wall in his own blood. No one dares clean it. He demands that the entire court wear veils for a week, claiming the gods are offended by human faces. At first it seems absurd until you remember the fates of those who refused. During one dinner, he rises mid-course and delivers a speech to the ceiling. I am the wheel, and the wheel turns all, he says. Do not get caught beneath me. You nod along. You try not to look at your food. You try not to breathe too loudly. Later that night, a new decree. All statues must be dressed in mourning garments until further notice. He believes the gods are grieving. For what? He doesn't say. The conspiracies swell. You hear the whispers at fountains, behind curtains, in hurried glances. Some suggest exile. Some dream of poison. Others speak of a dagger at night. Nothing solid, just outlines of rebellion, like smoke on the wind. But there's a problem. No one knows who to trust. Every plotter is terrified the others are spies. Every whisper could be a trap. The Emperor has weaponized suspicion. Loyalty isn't just rewarded, it's expected to be proven constantly. Devotion becomes a currency. And the price keeps rising. A nobleman commissions a 14-foot gold statue of the Emperor kissing the moon. It is declared insufficiently erotic and melted down. Another writes a love ballad to the emperor's toenails. He is promoted to high priest of imperial appendages. Still, the tension rises. You begin having dreams of doors closing, of flames licking at velvet curtains, of the emperor's eyes, unblinking, even in the dark. You're not the only one. The palace physician begins grinding his teeth so loudly it can be heard in the next wing. A scribe forgets how to write his own name and weeps for 3 hours. The royal bird trainer starts speaking only in riddles. He may be faking it. No one's sure. And through it all, the emperor thrives, or pretends to. He launches a new festival, the Day of Loyal Silence. No talking for 24 hours. Anyone heard speaking must write a 10,000 word ode to the emperor's mercy. You comply. Everyone complies. You don't know who you are anymore. Your thoughts sound like proclamations. Your dreams are scripted. Your smiles ache. And still the emperor glows, believing his myth, feeding it, stretching it, until it blots out the sky. He believes he is eternal. But you're beginning to wonder if the curtain is about to fall, and what kind of ending this play will have. You wake in darkness, not the soft, silk-draped kind that hangs in the emperor's sleeping chambers, but the kind that feels thick and wrong. No trumpets, no perfume, no humming servants adjusting flowers that wilt by order. Just quiet, heavy, unscheduled quiet. Something's happened. You feel it in your ribs. You dress fast and step into the hallway. The palace smells like oil and candle smoke. People move quickly, speaking in clipped whispers, eyes flicking to doorways. One guard bumps into a wall and apologizes to a bust of the emperor. You don't know whether to laugh or cry. No one will say what's going on, but they all say the same thing. He knows. That's enough to dry your mouth. You follow the current of the palace toward the atrium, where the emperor usually receives guests. It's empty now, save for a few veiled statues and an overturned goblet. The gold has already been picked off the grapes. The throne sits askew. It almost looks like the aftermath of a riot, but there's no blood. Not yet. Then a trumpet blares. Not the usual playful note that precedes a quirky proclamation. This is a full-bodied, sour tone, the kind that signals war, or justice, or both. The emperor enters. He walks slowly, dressed in deep crimson, his face painted white with streaks of blue running from his eyes to his chin. He looks like a corpse who's read too many theatrical reviews. Behind him, 5 masked figures carry scrolls. Today, he begins. We purged. No one breathes. The scrolls are unrolled. The names begin. Some you know, some you don't. Every name hits like a stone to the gut. A few gasps, a single stifled sob. The emperor raises one eyebrow and it's immediately silenced. He doesn't announce punishments he doesn't have to. These names are erased already. Their bodies just haven't caught up yet. You're not on the list. Not today, but you can feel the breeze of proximity. You remember the rumors, the failed plots, the shifting glances, the poisoned cups that never reached lips. And now the emperor has moved first. This is not justice. This is spectacle, a preemptive performance. He ends the reading with a flourish. We have excised the infection. The empire is clean again. Applause erupts forced, dry. Terrified, one man claps too slowly. You never see him again. After the purge, the emperor hosts a banquet. Of course he does. The theme, renewal. You sit at a long table draped in mourning silks dyed white. The food is ornate, shaped like skulls and phoenixes. The music is discordant intentional, probably. Every dish is said to represent the fragility of life. The emperor eats nothing but olives and occasionally whispers to a peach. You try not to blink too loudly. Between courses, performers reenact the cleansing. A new play written overnight or perhaps pre-written weeks ago, he likely anticipated this moment. It's a tale of a wise emperor betrayed by jealous fools, who purifies the world with radiant fire and generous mercy. He plays himself. Naturally, one actor, meant to represent disloyalty, stumbles during a dramatic monologue. The emperor signals. The man is dragged away. The performance continues with a prop goat in his place. No one laughs. Historians still debate whether this moment was pre-planned or truly spontaneous. Most believe the goat was already in costume. You manage to survive the night by becoming invisible. You nod. You clap. You toast. You even laugh twice. Convincingly, but deep down, something inside you fractures. Because you realize what's really happening. This isn't just the reign of a madman. This is the final stage of a collapsing reality. The empire is no longer ruled by law, or tradition, or belief. It's ruled by fear's reflection in a funhouse mirror. And somehow, the emperor still believes he's adored. He walks among the guests, touching shoulders, giving each person a word, a single word. It's a new tradition he invented 15 minutes ago. Yours is resilient. You say thank you. A senator gets moist. He doesn't ask questions. The night ends with fireworks launched indoors. No one dares suggest this is dangerous. Two tapestries catch fire. The emperor claps. The guests cheer. The flames are allowed to burn a little while, just long enough to be symbolic, before servants smother them with wine-soaked towels. You retreat to your quarters and find a note under your door. It's unsigned, written in hasty script. The wheel turns. Be ready, soon. You burn the note immediately. You lie awake that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to distant footsteps and the occasional scream, or maybe it's a laugh. It's hard to tell now. Your thoughts spiral. What would it take to end this? You've seen the cracks forming, the private glances, the hesitation and applause, the senator who deliberately spilled wine on the emperor's shoes and wasn't immediately executed. That's rebellion now, clumsiness. But how do you fight someone who rewrites reality? One misstep, one hint of dissent. And you're not just dead, you're erased, sculpted over, painted out. History is soft clay in his hands. And yet, the wheel turns. The next morning, the emperor doesn't appear. Again, 2 days in a row. This has never happened. The court assembles, jittery. Rumors sprout like weeds. He's ill. He's dead. He's become a god and no longer needs a body. By midday, a message is delivered. The emperor is meditating, in complete darkness, on the edge of revelation. That night, he emerges. He walks barefoot through the court, wrapped in a simple robe. No jewelry, no crown, just silence. He kneels before a statue of himself and weeps. I have given too much, he says, and you do not love me enough. No one dares respond. He stands. His expression hardens. But I forgive you. A wave of relief washes through the crowd. Then he adds, for now, you know the end is coming. But how it comes, that remains the final act. The next morning, the air in the palace is different. Not cooler, not warmer, just heavier, as though the walls themselves are bracing for impact. You walk slowly, ears sharpened, muscles tense. Everyone else moves the same way, like people inside a building with faulty foundations, knowing it could all collapse, but still sipping wine and complimenting the architecture. Something has changed. The emperor has not spoken since his nocturnal forgiveness ceremony. No decrees, no scrolls, no surprise laws about shoe color or hand gestures. The silence is terrifying. You've grown accustomed to his voice filling the halls, spilling through the chambers, commanding everything from the clouds to the color of melon rinds. Without it, the palace feels off balance, like a spinning top that has just begun to wobble. And yet, the machine of state continues. The Senate still convenes, reading pre-approved remarks aloud to empty chambers. The servants still set tables, polish mirrors, and oil the hinges of doors no one uses. The scribes continue writing the official history of events that haven't yet happened. But under it all, the whispers grow louder. They say the emperor has stopped eating. They say he speaks only to mirrors now. They say he's begun rehearsing his own funeral. You are summoned in the afternoon, not by name, but as part of a reflection assembly. It's a new concept. Apparently, the emperor has asked for one citizen from every background to provide personal testimony on what he means to them. Your background is, apparently, quiet enough to avoid suspicion. You find yourself seated in a semicircle with 11 others, in the Hall of Echoes. It's a cavernous chamber where every footstep seems to repeat itself a dozen times. Statues line the walls, all of them the emperor, in every imagined version. The child, the warrior, the poet, the god. Then he enters. No procession, no music, just the emperor, barefoot again, eyes sunken, beard untrimmed. He looks tired, really tired. Not like someone who partied too late, like someone who hasn't slept in a decade. He sits, cross-legged. No throne. And then he speaks. Tell me what I am. No one answers. A woman beside you whispers, you are our light. The emperor blinks slowly. Too easy. A man across from you says, you are everything Rome deserves. That one earns a smirk. Closer, he replies. But I want truth. The word hangs in the air like a thrown blade. You don't speak. Then he turns his eyes on you. You freeze. You feel like a rabbit caught in the gaze of a snake that's also the sun. And your mind races. 1,000 phrases flash through your head. Praise, poetry, silence, surrender. But none of them feel safe. Because the truth is, nothing is safe anymore. So you lie. You are the mirror we are too afraid to face. He smiles. You feel something in your stomach unclench. He stands and walks out. The assembly is over. No one knows what just happened. But somehow, you're all still alive. That counts as success. That night, the palace glows brighter than usual. Lanterns in every corridor. Candles in every window. The emperor has ordered a vigil. For what? Someone asks. For me, comes the answer. He parades through the torchlit halls in silence, wearing a robe embroidered with every title he's ever claimed. It drags behind him for several feet, picked up by 6 children dressed as virtues. He carries a cup filled with ashes. Tonight, he says, we honor all I have sacrificed. No one asks what's in the cup. Later, he sits before the great reflecting pool, staring into the black water. He doesn't speak, but you see his reflection tremble slightly. And you wonder if, in that moment, he's finally seeing himself not the god, not the performer, not the emperor, just a man, just a scared, desperate man, watching his story fall apart. Back in your chamber, another note is waiting. Tonight, South Passage. Wear black. No signature. Just the distinct scent of ink and urgency. You hesitate. The walls have ears. The floors, eyes. The shadows, probably spies. But still you go. The South Passage is quiet. A few others arrive, eyes hollow, voices low. Among them, a senator, 2 guards, a former priest, a noblewoman who once embroidered the emperor's name into her pillows. They speak in fragments. It has to be clean. No blood in the temple. Not during the games. No, he'd like that too much. You don't know what to say. So you listen. There is no definite plan. Just possibility. Just enough hope to risk thinking differently. Historians still argue who organized the first real plot. Some say it was the guards. Others say it was the senators. A few suggest it was the emperor himself, staging his own death for one final, perfect performance. But for now, you're in a room with frightened people trying to imagine the unimaginable. A Rome after him. They argue over methods. Poison is clean, but he tastes everything. Daggers are fast, but his robes are layered like armor. One proposes drowning. Another, exile. Someone even suggests locking him in a mirrored room and never letting him out. Let him live in his favorite company. Himself. In the end, there's no decision, just a shared look. An understanding. The wheel will turn. The question is, who dares to start it? You return to your chamber just before dawn. You look in the mirror and barely recognize yourself. You've changed. Not into someone braver, just someone more awake. The palace, once so loud with laughter and decrees, now hums with tension. You see it in every bowed head, every forced smile, every too smooth compliment. And in the emperor's eyes, when he appears that morning, you see something new. He knows, not everything, but enough. Enough to sense the shift, enough to tighten his grip, enough to make the next act the most dangerous one yet. Because a man who believes he is a god is terrifying, but a god who suspects he is only a man, that's the most dangerous creature of all. The morning after the secret meeting, the palace is almost aggressively normal. Musicians play in the gardens. Servants rearrange flowers into shapes resembling imperial virtues. The emperor appears in full regalia, glittering like a fire hazard. His crown so large it requires quiet support from a servant walking 3 paces behind him, subtly holding the back of it with both hands. But you can tell. It's an act. A desperate, frantic act of stability. The court plays along. They cheer too loudly, laugh too quickly, clap at phrases that aren't even jokes. The emperor smiles at all of it, but not because he's fooled. Because he wants to see how long everyone can pretend. At breakfast, he introduces a new decree. Today, I name a successor. The room freezes. He's never spoken of such a thing before. The very suggestion of a world without him was once enough to end a man. But now he says it with a grin and a goblet of plum wine. A divine being cannot die, he explains. But even gods deserve a nap. You're stunned. He gestures to a pedestal, and a boy is led in barely 15. Draped in a robe too long for him, he looks terrified. You recognize him. A nephew, or a cousin. Or maybe just someone with the right nose shape. Doesn't matter. The boy's lip trembles. This, the emperor says, is to be known as the Dawnlight. Applause thunders, but it's confused applause. A few people clap with genuine hope, others out of fear. Some look at the boy and think, is this mercy or bait? Historians still argue whether this moment was sincere, whether the emperor truly meant to step aside or whether it was just a psychological snare, a way to smoke out disloyalty. You're not sure. The emperor raises a hand. Do not celebrate too soon, he says. The sun does not set until it chooses to. You exhale through your nose. That's more like him. Later that day, during the games, the emperor stages a reenactment of his birth again. This time, it includes a mechanical lotus flower, 12 doves, and a man dressed as the moon who recites a poem in reverse Latin. Halfway through, the flower jams. A mechanical arm flails uselessly, slapping one of the doves. The emperor stares in frozen silence. You hold your breath. Then he laughs. Too loudly. Too long. The audience follows suit, like terrified children trying to match their parents' mood. But he never looks away from the broken mechanism. That night, there's a storm. Not outside, inside. The emperor tears through the palace like a whirlwind. Servants scatter. Musicians flee. Statues are shattered. Paintings slashed. He declares the flower was sabotaged. That the doves were trained to humiliate him. That the moon is lying again. He locks himself in the Hall of Storms. No one enters. No one leaves. For hours, you hear pacing, chanting, the clatter of thrown goblets. By morning, new laws are posted across the palace. All mechanical devices must be burned. All birds must be caged until proven loyal. The moon shall no longer be referenced in song, poetry, or dessert. People obey. The pastry chefs weep. But more than anything, there's a mood now, a sharpened edge. The emperor senses something coming, and so does everyone else. He stops attending meetings. He refuses to eat food unless it's been tasted by 12 different people, each from a different profession. One of them must be a child. One must be blind. One must have never touched grapes. No one knows why. He speaks in riddles. At one point, he declares that his heart has been stolen by a shadow. He asks the guards to find it and chain it. Another night, he orders everyone in the palace to wear masks shaped like his face. When one servant hesitates, the emperor screams, "How can I trust your soul if I don't see it looking back?" The next day, that servant is gone, replaced by someone who already wears the mask. You find yourself practicing your expressions in the mirror, smiling, bowing, laughing in increments. You have to get it right. One wrong twitch, and you might be feeding the swans. The conspirators remain quiet. They're biding time, waiting for the moment. And the emperor, in turn, circles them without knowing who they are. He begins holding random trials accusations with no basis, no pattern. One courtier is accused of treason because they yawned. Another because their sneeze sounded disrespectful. In a particularly surreal moment, he accuses his own statue of betrayal. The statue is publicly smashed, and everyone is ordered to cheer. One man hesitates. You never see him again. But even in this rising storm, you see cracks in the armor. One day, in the courtyard, you find him alone. No guards, no music, just the emperor, sitting on a bench, staring at a cracked tile. He doesn't see you at first, or maybe he does, and simply doesn't care. He speaks softly. I gave them everything. His voice isn't angry. It's lost. I built them a dream. I fed them with gold and music. I let them laugh. I made the world beautiful. You say nothing. He looks up, eyes rimmed red, and for a heartbeat, you see the boy he once was, the poet, the dreamer, the lost, lonely child trying to shape the world into something that would finally love him back. They don't deserve me, he whispers. You nod. He smiles faintly, and then he rises, straightens his robe, and the mask returns. The banquet must begin, he says. Tonight, we toast to immortality. That night's feast is the strangest yet. The emperor arrives dressed entirely in mirrored fabric, every inch reflecting the room around him. You can't look at him without seeing yourself. And maybe that's the point. He raises a goblet. To the eternal, he says. You sip your wine. Slowly, carefully. You're not sure who will act first, but you know tomorrow will not be the same, because something has snapped. And even the emperor knows it. The final morning arrives not with horns, nor dancers, nor the clatter of golden sandals down the hall. It arrives with birdsong, actual birdsong, real, organic, unscheduled nature. You stand at your window and listen, and for a moment, it feels like Rome again, not the emperor's Rome, not the mask and mirror show, but the breathing, imperfect city beneath. But peace is always an omen here. Word spreads. The emperor has summoned the court, all of it. No exceptions. Servants, scribes, senators, gardeners, performers, even the pastry makers, powdered and trembling, are in attendance. It's to be a grand address, the final declaration, someone whispers. You enter the great hall, packed with hundreds of bodies, all pressed close, all sweating and quiet. The ceiling has been draped with purple cloth. The columns are wreathed in laurel and silence. No musicians play, no birds caw, no voices rise above the hush. And then he enters, the emperor. But he's not glittering this time. He wears only a simple white tunic, his feet bare, his head unadorned. He looks like a statue, aged and weathered and somehow tired. The crowd parts as he walks. No one bows. No one dares. He climbs the steps to his dais, turns, and stands in silence. Then he speaks. Today, he says, I end. The words hit the room like a slap. Even the air seems to pause. I have ruled, he continues, not by sword, but by story. I have written myself into your breath, your sleep, your dinner plates. I have been God, poet, beast, and mirror. And still, you plot. He raises a hand, not in accusation, but in resignation. I gave you beauty, he says. You returned doubt. He steps down from the dais. The crowd parts again. I gave you light, he murmurs. And now I see shadows. He walks through the crowd, slower now, each step soft, measured, final. Some reach toward him. He doesn't pull away. Others recoil. He doesn't chase. You're frozen. You want to move, to breathe, to run, but instead, you watch. He reaches the far end of the hall, stops before a mirror. Not just any mirror, the original. The one he's called brother. The one he's used to study his expressions, refine his posture, rehearse his godhood. He looks into it. I don't see myself anymore, he says softly. Then he smashes it. Gasps echo. Shards scatter. He turns. It is time for Rome to dream a new dream. And then he leaves, just walks away, out of the hall, out of sight, out of history. The room stands still for what feels like eternity. Then someone exhales. Someone else sobs. A scribe drops his pen. The spell is broken. The curtain falls. He is gone by the afternoon. No one sees him leave. No carriage. No procession. Just absence. His chambers are empty. His crown lies folded in cloth on his bed. The mirror shards are swept away. The palace breathes. You wander the halls, no longer tiptoeing. People speak without flinching. They laugh real laughter. A dog barks and no one silences it. Statues are quietly removed. The veils come down. Doves fly again. The world doesn't collapse. It exhales. No successor is named. The boy called Dawnlight vanishes. Perhaps he ran. Perhaps someone helped him. No one asked too loudly. The Senate reconvenes. Hesitantly at first. The city outside begins to reassert itself stone by stone, voice by voice. Rome, wounded but alive, begins to remember what it feels like to belong to itself. Some claim the emperor died in a villa by the sea. Others swear he became a wanderer, dressed in rags, performing tragedies in backwater towns under fake names. A few even say he entered a monastery and never spoke again. Historians debate it endlessly. But you remember the mirror? The way he looked at it, the way it shattered. He knew. And that's the tragedy, isn't it? He knew. He could have ruled with wisdom. He had the mind, the charm, even moments of genuine beauty. But he chose spectacle over stability, flattery over friendship, fear over love. Because he believed the only way to be remembered was to be impossible to forget. And in that, at least he succeeded. You walk the palace one last time. The halls feel smaller now. The walls less golden. The tapestries faded. You find your reflection in the same polished bronze shield where you once saw your fear. Now you see a survivor. You step outside. The sun warms your face. And for the first time in years, it doesn't feel like someone else's light. So now, as you lie back beneath your covers, drifting in the soft hush between history and sleep, let the palace fade behind you. Let the gold dissolve into shadows. The trumpets quiet into memory. The madness soften into something distant. You've walked the marble halls. You've worn the mask. Clapped on command, dodged the glances, survived the storms. And now, you're outside of it, beyond the curtain. The emperor is gone, not forgotten, but no longer watching. The stories he etched in mirrors and laws will blur. The statues will crumble. The echoes of his voice will fade into dust. But your memory, your quiet witnessing remains, not as fear, not as worship, just as truth. And maybe that's the lesson hidden beneath the gold leaf and performance. That power, no matter how loud, how theatrical, how divine it tries to seem, is always just a person, one heartbeat, one breath, one mirror crack away from vanishing. So breathe now. Let go of the weight of robes and crowns. Let the torchlight of your imagination dim to embers. Let your heart beat slow like a curtain falling. You've seen the empire. You've walked its glittering cage, and you've stepped beyond it. Tomorrow, the world will keep spinning, with new stories, new rulers, new masks. But tonight, you're safe. You're still. You're free. Close your eyes. The show is over, and the stars are yours again.